The wind tore at the curtains and banged the window shutters loudly, as if some invisible force was persistently knocking on the old hotel. Seabreeze stood on the rocky shore, encrusted with salt, time, and memories. The dimly lit lobby smelled of the sea, damp wood, and something warm and long forgotten. Emily Carter sat behind the reception desk, frowning at the numbers on her laptop. Less than 24 hours remained until the anniversary ball, and the list of problems kept growing. Somewhere the roof was leaking, someone's air conditioner wasn't working, and half the lights in the ballroom were barely flickering. She pressed her fingers to her temples, fighting off a growing headache. "We need this ball," she whispered to herself like a mantra. "We have to prove we're still alive." At that moment, the door creaked open sharply. A gust of wind rolled into the lobby, bringing with it sprays of rain and dampness. A man stood on the threshold, soaked from head to toe, wearing a dark coat, clutching a battered leather bag to his chest. Emily stood up. Their eyes met. The man looked exhausted, but in his eyes, dark, almost black, there was a strange, dangerous kind of life. "Sorry for the late visit," he said, his voice hoarse and tired. "I need a room. For a week, maybe longer." Emily crossed her arms. "We're almost fully booked," she lied. "There's a major event tomorrow." "I'll pay in advance," the stranger replied shortly, pulling crumpled bills from his pocket. The rain roared behind him. Turning him away in such a downpour felt cruel. And yet, something about him made her wary, the posture of a man used to taking hits, the gaze of someone who had seen too much. Sophie, the red-headed bartender and Emily's best friend, peeked around the corner and, seeing the stranger, immediately broke into a wide grin. Well, look who the storm dragged in," she murmured, tucking a lock of hair behind her ear. Emily rolled her eyes and got back to business. "All right, room 13, second floor." She handed him a key. An old-fashioned one, heavy with a keychain shaped like a seashell. The man nodded gratefully. "Nathan Reed," he introduced himself before disappearing up the stairs, leaving a trail of wet footprints behind. As soon as he was out of sight, Sophie rushed over to the desk. "Did you see that?" she whispered, beaming. "A real mysterious stranger, just like in the novels." Emily only sighed, watching the rain stream down the fogged-up windows. "Mysterious strangers rarely bring happiness," she said quietly, more to herself than to Sophie. The morning after the storm was murky, heavy with salt and exhaustion. The sky hung low over the ocean, tinted a pale leaden gray. Emily stood behind the reception desk, a cup of strong coffee in her hands, watching the lazy waves roll onto the shore. Sophie breezed into the lobby like a hurricane, her green eyes sparkling, her red hair wild. "I saw him," she whispered excitedly, leaning on the desk. "He's in the dining room, drinking coffee, alone, a true loner, just like in the books." Emily shot her a sideways glance. "Sophie, he just spent a night in a torrential downpour. Maybe he just needs breakfast, not a love story." "Maybe," Sophie sighed dreamily. "But what if? What if it's fate?" Emily shook her head, hiding a smile. She knew Sophie too well. She could fall in love at first sight and suffer just as easily. The click of a door made them both jump. Nathan appeared in the lobby, holding a coffee cup. Without the coat, he looked different. Tall, lean, dressed in a dark t-shirt and jeans. He seemed out of place in the old hotel, like someone who had accidentally wandered into the past. He passed by, glancing briefly at Emily. Their eyes met. Just for a moment, but in that glance there was something sharp, wary, and almost familiar. Emily felt something stir inside her. "Go say something to him," Sophie urged her, half joking. "I'm working," Emily replied coolly, turning back to her computer screen. But her heart was beating a little faster. Later that day, she saw Nathan again. He was standing by the hotel's outdoor sign. The old wooden board had come loose during the storm and now hung from a single hinge. With a sigh, Emily approached him, armed with a hammer and nails. "Looks like we need some repairs," she muttered, more to herself than to him. Nathan cast her a quick glance and, without a word, took the hammer from her hand. His fingers brushed lightly against her palm, a brief, almost innocent touch, but it sent a jolt of electricity across her skin. "Allow me," he said. Emily watched as he skillfully drove the nail in, holding the sign steady with one hand. His movements were confident, precise. A man used to handling difficult situations. I didn't know you were a handyman, she mumbled, trying to mask a slight awkwardness. Sometimes you have to be, he replied with a faint smirk. Especially when no one else is around to help. Emily realized she was staring at him a little too long. She quickly turned away, pretending to adjust the sign. Thank you, she said evenly. Consider it worth a free cup of coffee. I'll remember that, Nathan said with a grin, handing her back the hammer. His fingers brushed hers again, supposedly by accident, but lingering just a moment too long to be truly accidental. For a second, silence hung between them, filled with the sound of the ocean and the creaking of old wood. Sophie was watching them from the dining room window, hands pressed against her cheeks like an eager audience member at a play. By noon, the hotel was a flurry of activity. Workers were stringing up lights above the backyard dance floor, waiters were setting long tables with white tablecloths, and Emily rushed from one problem to another, trying to keep everything under control. She was standing on the front porch, checking the final preparations off her list, when she heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive. A sleek black car pulled up to the hotel. A man stepped out, confident, wearing an expensive suit and a slight smirk. Emily recognized him instantly. Jonathan Blake. Her heart clenched, as if an icy blade had stabbed into her chest. He was her past, a mistake she had spent the last 3 years trying to forget. A man who had once promised her everything, and taken more than she was willing to give. Emily straightened, masking her growing tension with cold politeness. Emily, Jonathan said warmly, spreading his arms as if their meeting was a happy reunion. What a surprise. This is my hotel, Jonathan, she said dryly. You're not here by chance. He laughed, looking her over with a long, assessing gaze. Of course not. I heard about your anniversary celebration. Thought I'd stop by, see some old friends. And, he tilted his head, smiling, maybe discuss a little business. Emily crossed her arms. I'm not selling Seabreeze. Not yet, he corrected gently. But I'm confident you'll change your mind. Especially once you find out who's currently living under your roof. She frowned. What are you talking about? Jonathan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Your new guest, Nathan Reed. You might want to know who he really is. Emily forced herself not to step back, though every instinct screamed at her to keep her distance. I'm not interested in gossip. This isn't gossip, he whispered. It's fact. A few years ago, Nathan was a journalist. Popular, very talented, until he got caught fabricating stories. He smiled thinly. Half the ruined reputations in those days were his doing. And one of those reputations was very, very important to me. A chill ran down Emily's spine. People can change, she said, though a seed of unease was already taking root inside her. Maybe, Jonathan said, or maybe they just get better at hiding their sins. He stepped back, brushed an invisible speck off his sleeve, and added, think about it, until tomorrow night. And with that, he walked away, leaving her standing on the porch, clutching the checklist so tightly that the paper tore in her hand. Emily spent the rest of the day in a daze. She watched Nathan out of the corner of her eye as he sat in the corner of the dining room, engrossed in a book. Heard his voice when he politely ordered another cup of coffee from Sophie. Caught his glances, steady, unsettling. Who are you really, Nathan Reed? She thought, feeling doubt gnaw away at her certainty. Sophie, in contrast, was glowing with happiness. He asked me to go for a walk tomorrow after the ball, she whispered excitedly at dinner. Can you believe it? Emily nodded absent-mindedly, as if she were somewhere far, far away. In her mind, she kept hearing Jonathan's voice, forger, liar. But then she remembered Nathan fixing the sign. The way he looked at her. The way his fingers had, accidentally, or not, brushed hers. Her instincts were at war. Fear against trust. Heart against mind. And outside, the clouds were gathering again. The old hotel seemed to hold its breath, waiting for another storm. That evening, Seabreeze felt different, no longer a tired, aging inn on the edge of the world, but a living, glowing pearl emerging from the darkness of the stormy coast. Strings of lights spilled across the courtyards like spiderwebs catching tiny stars. The creaking of wooden floors, the scent of freshly cut lilies, the clinking of glasses, the low hum of laughter. All wove together into the illusion of celebration, an illusion Emily so desperately wanted to believe in. She stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching the gathered guests. The local elite, a few tourists, couples who had come to celebrate their anniversaries, all united by a single desire: to escape the dullness of everyday life, if only for one night. Emily smoothed her narrow blue dress, too tight, too revealing across her back, and inhaled the salty air deeply. She felt as if the fabric was constraining her, as if she herself were a stranger at this celebration of life. "Never thought I'd see you in a dress," came a familiar voice behind her. "Nathan." Emily turned, struggling to keep her expression neutral. In the glow of the lights, he looked almost unreal. The sharp cut of his suit, the easy, confident stride, the faint smile on his lips. But what caught her most was his gaze, steady, piercing, as if he could see straight through her defenses. "And I didn't think you'd even show up," she replied coolly. "You invited all the guests," he said lightly. "I'm just following the rules." For a moment, tension hovered between them, subtle, like a whisper, yet dense enough to feel it against the skin. The music shifted. A slow melody floated into the air, soft and smoky. Nathan held out his hand. "Come with me." Emily froze. Every instinct inside her screamed no, no, this is wrong, no, this will hurt. But still, she placed her hand in his. He pulled her closer, and the world around them disappeared. The dance was strange. Awkward at first, as if Emily had forgotten how to move with someone else. Her body resisted, so used to solitude. But Nathan guided her gently, carefully, giving her space for every hesitant step. "You're nervous," he said softly. Emily smiled faintly. "I always get nervous when I break my own rules." "What rules?" "Never dance with men you don't know." "Then get to know me," he said, looking her straight in the eyes. His hand on her waist was warm. Their movements grew steadier. The music slowly wove itself around them, binding them together with threads neither dared to name. Emily felt the wall around her starting to crack. Damn it, she was letting herself get carried away. "Don't get involved," she warned herself. Not here, not now. But her heart was telling a different story. At the edge of the dance floor, Sophie stood watching them. She watched them with a glass of champagne in hand, unblinking. Her face, usually open and good-natured, had become a mask. Pain twisted inside her, but she couldn't look away. Inside Sophie, two sides were at war. The one that wanted to believe in her friend, and the one that felt betrayed. When the music faded and Emily, blushing slightly, slipped from Nathan's arms, Sophie knew. This night had changed everything. Emily hurried toward the buffet, feeling Sophie's gaze heavy on her back. She knew. There would be no avoiding this conversation. Sophie caught up with her near the big round table laden with fruit. "You could have warned me," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Sophie," Emily began, but Sophie cut her off. I told you I liked him. I trusted you." Emily lowered her eyes. No words could erase what had just happened. "Nothing happened," she said hollowly. "Really?" Sophie lifted her chin. "Are you sure? Because I saw it. Everyone saw it." She stepped back, as if afraid of being touched. "You know," she said bitterly, "you were always the stronger one. Smarter. I looked up to you. Like someone who always knew what she wanted. And now you've taken even my hope away." And she walked off, leaving Emily standing there among the rotting fruit and the clinking of glasses. The night slowly rolled toward its end. Guests said their goodbyes. Waiters collected the dishes. The strings of lights began to flicker out one by one. Emily stood on the terrace steps, holding an empty glass, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. Nathan approached, stopped beside her. They said nothing. The breeze carried the scent of the sea and the bitter taste of unspoken words. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "There's nothing to be sorry for," she replied, her voice hollow. He stood too close, too warm, too real. And she hated herself for wanting to step toward him. "It wasn't a mistake," he added, and in his voice there was nothing but honesty. Emily gripped the glass in her hand until it hurt. "It was weakness," she said. Nathan tilted his head. "Sometimes," he said softly, "there's more strength in weakness than in any armor." He walked away, leaving her alone. She sat on the steps for a long time, staring out into the endless darkness of the ocean. The storm had passed, but it had left its scars. Small destructions in the garden, a broken sign, and something else. Something broken inside herself. As a blood-red moon rose slowly over the sea, Emily allowed herself to cry for the first time in a long, long while. Because deep down, she already knew. There was no way back. The morning was far too quiet. The winds had died, but there was no relief. It felt like the silence itself was stretched to the breaking point. Like the calm before a storm, even worse than the one that had shattered the sky. Emily stood by the window of her office, watching the first rays of sunlight crawl across the cracked tiles of the courtyard. Echoes of last night's ball still clung to the air. Crumpled napkins scattered across the grass, a broken string of lights, empty glasses. And guilt, clinging to her skin like salt spray. She couldn't shake Sophie's look from her mind. That moment when something between them had cracked, irreparably. Emily clenched her hands into fists, trying not to think about Nathan. About the way he had looked at her. About how her own heart had raced out of control in response. She wanted to believe it could all be fixed, that wounds could heal if left in silence. But wounds caused by betrayal didn't heal in silence. They festered. Sophie that morning was unusually quiet. In the kitchen, she mechanically wiped down the counter, then began setting cups with unnatural focus. The smile had vanished from her face, as if someone had simply erased it. "Hi," Emily called softly. Sophie didn't turn around. "Hi." A pause. "Can we talk?" "About what?" Sophie's voice was even, but there was steel beneath it. Emily lowered her gaze. She understood. Any word now would only make things worse. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, and stepped away, leaving her friend alone with her silent anger. Later that day, when the sun was already beginning to dip toward the horizon, Sophie, still seething with hurt, decided to step out into the backyard. She needed to clear her head, to chase away the thoughts that clung to her mind like poisonous seaweed. Making her way through the empty hallways toward the inner courtyard, she accidentally overheard voices. She stopped. Nathan's voice. And another, unfamiliar. Driven by a mix of pain and curiosity, Sophie pressed herself carefully against the door to the storage room, from which the conversation floated. "I can't wait any longer," Nathan was saying, irritation sharpening his tone. "You promised me information. Be patient," the stranger replied, his voice cold and harsh. "If Emily doesn't sell the hotel, we'll find another way to pressure her." Sophie froze. "This is getting too dirty," Nathan said. She's not like that. They're all the same," the second man scoffed. "Money or fear. There's no other way." Something inside Sophie shattered. Her mind couldn't fully grasp what she had just heard, but her heart already knew. Trouble was here, closer than ever. And she had let it inside the walls of Seabreeze. Sophie staggered back from the door and fled into the courtyard, reeling. She felt betrayed twice over, first by Emily, now by Nathan. The man she had thought might be her chance at happiness turned out to be a stranger, entangled in dark schemes. And her friend, her only family here, was defending him. Sophie knew. She couldn't stay silent any longer. That evening, the courtyard once again filled with guests for the final cocktail reception before the ball's closing. Emily stood at the bar, pretending to be busy, though inside she felt hollow. She was afraid to meet Sophie's eyes. Afraid to see the final break there. Sophie approached her abruptly, without greetings or pleasantries. "We need to talk," she said quietly but firmly. Emily flinched. She nodded, set aside her tray, and led Sophie toward the side exit. On the empty veranda, lit only by a dim lamp, Sophie laid everything out. "I heard Nathan. With my own ears. He's not acting alone. He's here to force you to sell the hotel." It hit Emily like a slap across the face. "What did you say?" she whispered. Sophie repeated it, slowly, enunciating each word like a verdict. Emily shook her head in disbelief. "No, that's impossible. You must have misunderstood." Sophie lifted her chin. "I heard him. He spoke about pressure, about blackmail, about money." She fell silent, giving Emily space to absorb it. Emily stepped back, as if trying to escape her own thoughts. Nathan. The man she had almost trusted. The man she had let tear down walls she had spent years building. I need to talk to him," Emily mumbled. "You need to throw him out," Sophie said firmly. "Before it's too late." Emily said nothing. She could feel everything around her crumbling. The hotel, her friendship, her trust, and something even more fragile. Her heart. She found Nathan out on the terrace. He was standing by the railing, staring at the black ocean. The water didn't move, as if it, too, was waiting. Emily approached slowly, as if in a dream. "Can we talk?" she asked. Nathan turned, and Emily searched his face for signs of guilt, lies, anything, but found only exhaustion. "Of course," he said. They walked inside in silence, into a small empty hall. Emily closed the door behind them. "Who are you, really?" she asked directly. Nathan remained silent. The silence stretched between them like a heavy chain. "I heard you," she went on. "I heard that you're working with someone. That you're not here by accident." Nathan looked away. "It's complicated," he said quietly. "Explain," she demanded. Now. He ran a hand over his face, as if trying to wipe away the last traces of his mask. "Yes. At first, I came here on assignment," he admitted at last. "I was paid to find a way to pressure you. To make you sell Seabreeze." With every word, Emily felt something tearing inside her. But then, Nathan raised his eyes to hers, filled with pain. Then everything changed. What change? Her voice was trembling. "You," he said, "you changed everything." Emily let out a short, joyless laugh. "Too late." She turned away, fighting back tears. "Emily," he stepped toward her. "Everything that happened between us, it was real. I swear." "And at the beginning?" she asked. "Was all of it a lie?" He remained silent, and in that silence was her answer. When Emily walked away without looking back, Nathan stayed where he was, watching her silhouette dissolve into the darkness. And he knew. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't losing everything. The hardest thing is knowing you destroyed the only thing that ever mattered. Somewhere in the distance, the waves rolled lazily. But their familiar murmur no longer soothed Emily. It only emphasized the silence, where every movement, every breath echoed inside her. She sat in her office, fingers clutching the edges of the desk, staring into nothingness. The conversation with Nathan kept replaying in her mind, tearing at her thoughts, wounding her memories. Yes, he had confessed everything. Yes, he was remorseful. But what did it matter now? Every word they'd shared, every glance, every accidental laugh, it all now seemed like a lie, a part of some carefully crafted performance. For the first time in a long time, Emily didn't just feel hurt. She felt foolish. And that hurt the most. The door creaked softly. Sophie stood in the doorway. Her face was still tense, but there was something like sympathy in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, almost in a whisper. Emily lifted an empty gaze to her. "For what?" "For not telling you right away. For putting you in front of the facts like that. I just wanted to protect you. But maybe I chose the wrong way." Emily gave a faint smile. "It doesn't matter. It's too late now anyway." Sophie stepped closer and hesitantly sat across from her. "But there's something else, Em." "What?" Sophie pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. "I overheard the rest of their conversation," she said quietly. "And I managed to record some of it." Emily took the flash drive slowly. Something stirred inside her. Whether it was hope or fear, she couldn't tell. "It's all on there," Sophie said. "About Nathan. And about Jonathan." Jonathan's name hit like a blow. "Jonathan?" Emily repeated, feeling an old pain flare up inside her. Sophie nodded. "Nathan wasn't acting on his own. Jonathan set him up years ago. He orchestrated a scandal to push Nathan out of the way, and now he decided to use him again, to get Seabreeze." Emily stood up. The room spun around her. What she was hearing didn't make sense. "Why?" she whispered. "Because Jonathan has always needed to control everything," Sophie said. "And because you're one of the few who ever said no to him." Sophie stood beside her. "Nathan was just a pawn. Maybe at first he was working against you, but then everything changed." Emily closed her eyes. She heard Sophie's words, but she couldn't force herself to believe them. Too much pain. Too much betrayal. Late that night, when the hotel had sunk into complete silence, Emily powered on her old laptop and inserted the flash drive. The recording was short. And it was there, Nathan's voice. And Jonathan's. Their words were tight with hidden tension. "She won't give up," Nathan said. "She'll fight for Seabreeze until the end." "Then make her," Jonathan replied coldly. "If not with money, then with fear." "I'm not doing that." Nathan's voice was heavy with exhaustion. "Find someone else. It's too late, Reed. You're already here. And she already trusts you. The recording cut off. Emily sat in the dark, staring at the empty screen. She was shaking, with anger, with fear, with the realization of how close she had come to disaster. But something else shook her even more. The realization that Nathan, despite everything, had tried to stop the plan. He wasn't perfect, he had lied, but he had fought for her. The decision came to her in the silence, just as the first pale pink light of dawn began to creep across the sky. She would not let Jonathan win. She would not give up her home. She would not betray those she loved. And maybe, just maybe, she would give herself another chance too. In the morning, Emily found Nathan in the garden. He was standing by the old bench, head bowed, looking like someone ready to accept their punishment. When she approached, he didn't immediately dare to meet her eyes. "I heard the recording," she said without preamble. He flinched. "So you know everything?" Emily nodded. The silence between them was dense and heavy. At last, Nathan spoke. "I came here because I had no choice. I had nothing left, no name, no career. Jonathan, he promised me a life. Some kind of life." He looked up at her, and the pain in his eyes made Emily's heart ache. "But from the first moment here, from the first moment I met you, I knew I couldn't go through with it." Emily said nothing. "Everything I did afterward," he continued, "I did to try to protect you. I tried to find a way to break free before it was too late. But I was already too late." He took a step closer. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Nathan said. "I don't deserve it. I just want you to know, my feelings for you were real." He reached out a hand but didn't touch her, he just stood there, waiting. Emily looked at him for a long time. A very long time. Then she said quietly, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive." He nodded, and in that nod, there was acceptance. "But I do know," she added, "that it's worth fighting for the truth. And for what matters." Before he could say anything, she turned and walked away. But this time, her steps were firm. Because now, she knew what she had to do. The day began with a deathly stillness. The ocean stood motionless, as if it too sensed that ahead was not just another day, but a battle. The palm trees barely swayed, as if they didn't dare move. Even the air was thick, heavy like the moment before a storm. Emily stood before the mirror in her room, fastening the buttons of her blouse mechanically. Her hands were trembling. Today everything would be decided. Today, she would either save Seabreeze and her honor, or lose everything. She looked at her reflection. There was exhaustion in her eyes. Bitterness etched around her mouth. The weight of past mistakes on her shoulders. "You're strong," she reminded herself. "You've survived worse." But was it true? Her whole life, Emily had built walls. Walls to keep out pain, disappointment, love. She had chosen solitude, faithful, reliable. Walls didn't betray. And tell him. And tell Nathan. Now, a storm raged inside her, tearing apart everything she once thought unshakable. Pain, fear, and somewhere deep within, a tiny, almost invisible spark of hope. Emily took a deep breath, forcing cold calmness onto her face. It was time to play the part. Guests began arriving at noon. Familiar faces. Local businessmen, tourists, old acquaintances. Everyone laughed, joked, raised their glasses, no one suspecting that beneath the surface, a real war was brewing. Emily moved through the hall like a shadow, checking the food, the music, the lighting. Everything had to be perfect. Seabreeze's last chance to prove itself worthy. In one corner, Jonathan stood, surrounded by a cluster of smug men in expensive suits. His smile was polite, slightly lazy. He looked like he had already won. Across the room, Emily caught his eye. He lifted his glass, a silent toast, and smirked. She answered with a cold half-smile. And moved on. Sophie stood by the bar, watching her. When Emily approached, she gave a small nod. "Everything's ready." Emily glanced at the small flash drive hidden in the pocket of her jacket. "The recording. Their only weapon. Are you sure?" Sophie asked, still hesitant. "I'm sure," Emily said firmly. "I'm not going to let him destroy what I built." Sophie squeezed her hand. "I'm with you." Emily felt warmth breaking through the icy armor she had wrapped herself in. Friendship. Real friendship. Something worth fighting for. Time dragged painfully slow. Emily spotted Nathan. He was standing near the terrace doors, off to the side, alone. He didn't try to come closer. He knew. Today was her day. Her fight. But when their eyes met across the crowd, just for a second, Emily saw everything in his gaze. Guilt, support, a silent plea for forgiveness. And for the first time, Emily allowed herself not to look away. Later, she thought, if there's a chance. First, justice. Toward evening, when most of the guests were sufficiently relaxed from the wine and music, Emily took the microphone. Her heart was pounding like a trapped bird. Dear friends, she began, her voice surprisingly steady, thank you for coming to support Seabreeze on this special day. Applause. Smiles. She continued, but I want you to know, behind the scenes of this celebration, there's a story that needs to be told. A tense silence filled the room. A story of betrayal, greed, and of people fighting to save what they hold dear. She nodded to Sophie. Sophie turned on the projector, connected to the speakers. And the recording began to play. She won't back down. Then make her. Money or fear. Jonathan's and Nathan's voices filled the hall like an icy blast. The guests froze. Someone dropped a glass. Eyes darted between the screen and Jonathan. He turned pale but quickly pulled himself together, trying to force a smirk. Nonsense. It's fake. Emily stepped forward. We have proof. Documents. Messages. Witnesses. Her voice was cold as steel. And if necessary, tomorrow all of it will be handed over to the police. Before everyone's eyes, Jonathan changed. The smug mask slipped away, revealing raw malice. He shot Emily a murderous glare and, without a word, stormed toward the exit. His men followed, grim and confused. Emily stood trembling from the tension but refused to falter. When the doors slammed shut behind the traitors, for a heartbeat the hall was completely silent. And then came applause. At first, a few hesitant claps. Then more, and more, until suddenly, the entire hall was giving her a standing ovation. Not for Seabreeze. Not for success. For her. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. But she blinked them away. Today, she had won. Late that night, after the guests had left, after the music had faded and the bartenders began clearing the tables, Emily stepped out onto the empty terrace. The ocean was murmuring again, softly, soothingly. And in that sound, she heard footsteps. Nathan stopped a few steps away. He didn't come closer. He waited. Emily turned toward him. The silence was soft, almost warm. Finally, she said quietly, "You could have left." "I could have," he answered simply. "Why did you stay?" He sighed. "Because, despite everything, I wanted to be here. For you." Emily looked at him for a long time. "It will be hard for me to trust again," she said honestly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," he replied. "I'm just asking for a chance to prove I can be different. Here, with you." And in his voice, there was no bravado, no lightness, only sincerity. Emily stepped closer. And for the first time in many months, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. "All right," she said softly. "One chance." Nathan smiled. Just barely, but in that faint smile, there was more light than in the entire clouded sky. The next days passed in a blur. News of the scandal quickly spread through town. Newspapers and blogs eagerly discussed Jonathan Blake's dirty games. His reputation collapsed swiftly, like a house of cards. Old partners abandoned him, and new ones didn't even try to come close. Seabreeze was safe. But Emily still felt uneasy, as if even now, with the storm gone, her world was standing on thin ice. The hotel breathed differently, lighter. Guests, now knowing the truth, began treating her with respect. Bookings returned, as if an invisible barrier had been lifted. And for the first time in a long while, hope shimmered on the horizon. That morning, Emily stood at the reception desk, sorting papers, when Nathan walked in. He looked different, no longer weighed down by exhaustion. Calm, composed, and in his eyes, there was no more pleading, only open honesty. "Are you busy?" he asked. Emily set the papers aside. "No. What's going on?" He handed her a slim envelope. "Everything left from my contracts with Blake. And letters where he gave me instructions." Emily took the envelope, feeling its weight, the weight of trust. "I want you to hand it to the police if he ever tries to hurt you again," Nathan said, smiling faintly. "Everything should be on your side." Emily looked at him for a long time. And something inside her shifted, something warm, soft, but also strong. Thank you, she said quietly. Nathan nodded and turned to leave. But halfway to the door, he stopped. Emily, he said, without looking back, if one day you decide there's a place for me in your life, I'll be here. And he left. This time, not forever. Emily watched him go, feeling the wings inside her start to unfurl. That same afternoon, Emily and Sophie finally wrapped up the last of the anniversary arrangements. They sat at a small table by the beach exit, dizzy from laughter and fresh air. Do you even realize what we did? Sophie asked, holding up a glass of lemonade. We saved Seabreeze, Emily smiled. And ourselves. The ocean was calm. The new day spilled across the horizon in soft golden light. The sand underfoot was cool, damp from the night. Emily walked barefoot along the shore. The wind tossed her hair, carrying the scent of salt, flowers, and something else, something new. Behind her, the Seabreeze Hotel loomed, old, yet somehow reborn with hope. And beside her walked Nathan. They were silent, savoring the simplicity of the moment. There was no need for complicated words anymore. No need for masks. They both knew. Each had made a choice. Each had chosen to fight. For truth, for love, for themselves. Emily stopped, lifting her face to the wind. Do you remember how it all started? She asked, smiling. How you almost got blown away at the front desk. Nathan chuckled. And how you brought more trouble into my life than the entire hotel combined, she teased him. He pulled her gently by the waist. But in the end, I stayed, he said. And, I think, I want to stay for a long time. Emily looked into his eyes. For the first time, without fear. Then stay, she whispered. And they kissed, simply, calmly, unhurriedly. Like people who knew the true value of trust. Emily sat on the old bench at the edge of the beach, hugging her knees. Her sandals sat forgotten in the sand nearby. Today there were no guests, no waiters, no worries about room bookings or bills. Today, there was only the moment. Only her and him. Nathan approached slowly, without haste, as if afraid to disturb the fragile silence. May I? He asked, nodding at the spot next to her. Emily gave a small smile and nodded. He sat down, stretching his legs out on the sand, leaning his head on his hand. For a long time, they just sat there silently, listening to the ocean breathe. No words were needed. Everything they needed to say was already floating between them. I used to think, Nathan finally spoke, that after everything I'd done, I'd lost the right to this. To what? She asked. He turned to her. To dreams. Emily looked at his face. Tired, scarred, but alive, real. Not a mask, not an illusion, a person. We all make mistakes, she said softly. What matters is what we do after them. Nathan lowered his head, clenching his fingers into a fist. I've thought a lot about this. About everything. I ruined my career, my reputation. I trusted people I shouldn't have. I lost everything. And only here, on this forgotten piece of land, did I become myself again. He sighed, gazing at the horizon. But most of all, I'm afraid of losing you. Emily remained silent. His words pierced her like sharp needles. But along with the pain, something else came. A bright, tender feeling that she had long been afraid to admit. She turned toward him. You don't have to be perfect, Nathan, she said. I need someone who will be real. Someone who will fight, who will stay, even when it's scary. She extended her hand and squeezed his palm. You stayed. He looked at their intertwined fingers, as if afraid to believe it. Then let me fight for us, he whispered. Emily nodded, struggling to hold back tears. Only together. They got up from the bench, took off their shoes, and walked barefoot along the water's edge. The waves embraced their ankles, caressed their toes, washing away the past. Behind them, Seabreeze slowly bathed in the light of the rising sun, no longer just a hotel, but a symbol of their second chance. Nathan stopped, wrapped his arms around her shoulders, and they watched together as the sun rose from the ocean. And in that moment, Emily understood. Happiness doesn't come when everything is perfect. Happiness is born where there is trust. Where people accept each other, with all their fears, mistakes, and scars. Where the heart no longer hides behind walls. The waves rolled in again and again, whispering their names on the endless sand. And Emily knew. Everything lay ahead. Mistakes, victories, doubts, love, but now, together, Because true love is not a perfect fairy tale. It's home. A home built right in the heart of another person. And in that home, Emily finally found herself. Forever.